Hey everybody, and welcome to This Week in Hell. This is not the second time I've had to record this entire video because I forgot to turn on the audio interface. Never happened. Don't know why I'm mentioning that. No sorry. Anyway, first up this week. Just when we thought it was safe, he's back at it again. Jussie Smollet, the biggest tool in history. Alright, maybe a slight exaggeration. A medium-sized tool. Had his 2019 conviction overturned. To catch you up if you missed it, back in 2019, what happened is he claimed he was walking home, minding his own business, when two guys wearing MAGA hats attacked him in Chicago. He reported the attack to the police, where he alleged that the attackers had shouted homophobic and racist slurs, while also trumpeting MAGA slogans. We were all agog and aghast, and other words which also have meanings, at such an awful attack. They even poured bleach on him. Whew. But of course it didn't happen. It would later emerge that he had staged the attack for reasons which I'm still unsure of. I'd like to sit him down and just ask him, dude, why? With that exact tone. Maybe we could get Oprah to do that. I don't know what she's doing these days. So anyway, the attack had been staged with the help of two brothers he had been working with while on the show Empire. He was one of the main cast of that show. He'd been doing pretty well, got a lot of notoriety that he could have then parlayed into additional work. So I don't know why he felt the need to get attention by staging a fake hate crime, is what he'd done. So anyway, they found these brothers, who were Nigerian American, by the way, and it emerged that it was publicity. He was hoping to gain publicity from it. You did. Yay. Good job. And upon raiding the home of these two brothers, police gathered a number of pieces of evidence, including proof that he had paid them $3,500 for the attack. It's not bad for a few minutes improv, you know, it's pretty good. Smollet himself was arrested and indicted for disorderly conduct. A deal was ultimately reached in which the charges would be dropped in exchange for community service and him forfeiting the $10,000 bond. He agreed to that, and at that point, that should be all well and good. He committed a crime, he was caught, he was punished, everybody should move on, maybe give him a little bit of a slap about the face, but apart from that, move on, no harm, no foul, let him learn from his mistake and move on with his life, hopefully having learned his lesson. Except, Chicago decided to sue him for the cost of the investigation to the tune of $130,000, and he was then indicted again and sentenced to 150 days in jail, ultimately being ordered to pay $120,106. His lawyers obviously appealed that, and he was then released pending appeal. Now, in the intervening years, I'm not going to go through every detail, but there was various things that happened in the intervening years which ultimately bring us up to today, 2024, the time of recording, in which that conviction has been overturned. As it should be. The reason for that being, as mentioned, a plea deal had been reached and accepted. He'd already paid the price for the crime, which, given what he did, the only thing that really suffered there, beyond misusing public resources, certainly, for an investigation, was his reputation. That's ultimately what suffered here. So he shouldn't have been tried again for that crime. He had been punished in a manner that the law felt was just, and that should have been it. So, the conviction's been overturned. What that does not mean, however, is that he was innocent of the original crime. He's still guilty of that, and was still punished for that, and that still stands. He's a very stupid man who did a very stupid thing. Hopefully he becomes wiser from it. And next up, for those who don't know, Alex Jones had to declare bankruptcy, the result of which was a bankruptcy auction, and his assets were sold off. The fun thing about that is his media empire, InfoWars, was bid on and won by The Onion with the support of the families of the Sandy Hook victims. The reason, again, you'd have to be living under a rock not to know, but he had been besmirching the reputations of the families. He'd been claiming that there were no victims, that they were all actors, that no one had actually died, essentially continually re-traumatizing these people. So not only did he do it, but his army of toadies and followers and weasels just harassing these people for years. So this is a pretty just outcome, given that he will obviously go away, start a new business under a new name, and continue on as he is. So the $1.5 billion judgment against him, pretty fair, I'd say, given what he'd done. However, also worth mentioning that now that The Onion owns it, they're intending to use it as more of a force for good, so spreading factual information instead of misinformation. They won't be able to do this, but it would be so fun if they could get an Alex Jones lookalike to host the show, but be dispensing information, like real information, like fighting against the MAGA misinformation. That would be so much fun. They probably can't do that legally with likeness rights and all, but they could argue that it's a parody. Anyway, that's not the story we're talking about. I know I went on for a long time for a story we're not talking about, but what we are talking about comes from that. This week, Elon Musk decided to fart his way into the narrative, as he often does, with the claim on his behalf, the lawyers for his company X Corp filing a notice of appearance. What they're appearing for, nobody knows. Why they're here, nobody knows. Where they'll go, no one cares. As I said, it's not been disclosed yet. You should be looking at at least the first page of the notice on screen right now. I will link to it in the description if you want to read the whole thing. It's just a few pages long, basically saying, hey, we're going to be here. There is speculation saying that Musk is going to... Worth pointing out that Musk is an associate of Trump and Alex Jones, all those creatures. They're all very, very cozy with each other. So he is likely doing this as a last-ditch attempt to defend Jones. Ben Collins, the Onion's chief executive, seems quite confident that the situation will be resolved satisfactorily and they can all move on with their plans. But for now, speculation is that perhaps Musk is claiming that Jones's Twitter account is the property of Twitter. I don't think that's an argument that they're going to win. But we'll see. It's theatre is what it is. Attempting to delay the process and make it as difficult as they can be. I don't think it's going to go in their favour, but I am frequently wrong, so let's see how that shakes out. Kind of an odd little story up next for you. A Wisconsin man by the name of Ryan Bogwart, 45 years old, disappeared while on a kayaking trip. It was feared he was a victim of drowning and had passed, so a search was launched in the area trying to find him. After a period of 54 days, they couldn't find him, because he wasn't dead. This delightful little tool faked his death. Needless to say, the good people of Wisconsin are not happy, and are either looking to correct the error of his continued existence, or, more reasonably, get the money back that they spent on the search, because he wasn't dead. The police would, in the course of their investigation, they found evidence that Ryan had fled to Europe. He later did eventually get in contact with the police and was like, oh, hello everyone, I'm alive, yay, woohoo, so exciting. So now people are annoyed. It was essentially a proof of life video. He said, I'm here, I'm in my apartment, this is the date, very much confirming he's alive. Now, assuming that there's no shady goings-on involved in his disappearance, there doesn't seem to be at first look, he's done a very awful thing. The Green Lake County Sheriff Mark Podol said at a press conference on Thursday, the great news is that he's still alive and well, and the bad news is that we don't know exactly where Ryan is, and he has not decided to return home. In doing this, Ryan has abandoned his wife and children, which makes it even worse. Police have discovered that he had been in contact with a woman from Uzbekistan. We don't know for sure if there was a romantic relationship here, but he had been speaking with her in the time leading up to his departure. They have been urging him to return home. Given that he was stupid enough to do it in the first place, again, that is assuming that there's no shady goings-on here and he hasn't been coerced in some way or manipulated. He might have just been, leading with his little head. He's done a very bad thing. Although ultimately his wife and children might be better off without him in their lives. Next up, Katy Perry defeats Katy Perry in glorious battle. Oh, hang on, no, it was a legal thing. Okay. For a minute there, I thought the walls of the multiverse had fallen down, and an alternate version, an evil, if you will, Katy Perry had come from a universe in which she wasn't quite as successful, and had done battle with our Katy Perry, therefore killing her and taking her place. Turns out it's not quite that interesting, although it's still quite interesting. A ruling was made last year in Australia that the Australian designer Katy Taylor, who had been operating a business under her birth name of Katy Perry, a clothing business, different spelling, in her favour, that she was allowed to continue selling merchandise under that name, and the more famous of the two Katys was not allowed to sell merchandise under her name, again, different spelling. This isn't an example of Taylor cashing in. They both were using the name legitimately for very sincere reasons before they'd even heard of each other. I suspect that the reason it shook out this way is because way back in 2009, Perry's team sent Taylor a cease and desist letter, which, to give you context, you have to defend a trademark. That's why these things happen oftentimes. It's not done to be malicious. It could be done to be malicious, but you have to defend it. You have to defend it actively and aggressively. Otherwise, you might lose it. If you have the trademark and you're not defending it, then you go to court, and then the judge will be like, well, you weren't defending it. All sorts of things happened. Why should I rule in your favour? Hashtag, I'm not a lawyer. And so that's likely what happened here. However, presumably they went to Katy Perry herself after this, and she thought, you know what, I don't see any reason why we can't, just coexist. Peaceful coexistence is what was proposed. So they sent another communication saying, hey, look, no harm, no foul. We're happy for you to keep doing your business. We'll leave you alone. You don't have to worry about any legal action from us, providing you leave us be. And then we can sell merchandise under the Katy Perry name. Taylor didn't like that. No, she then decided to start legal proceedings against the bigger, more famous Katy Perry, who has sharks in her employ. Also lawyers. So, it worked out about as well as you think it would work out. This year, the ruling which went in her favour was now overturned. So that means that the singer, Katy Perry, I've said that a lot this episode, the singer Katy Perry can now sell merchandise in Australia with her name on it, clothing, whatever else. And Katy Taylor, I'm not sure where that leaves her. It seems that the way she's responded is that she's saying she's lost everything. So I don't know if that just means that she can't use her name anymore, or if she's just so upset that the ruling went against her. And she could use her name, and the Katy Perry people would be happy to leave her alone. Maybe if they're feeling generous, they'd be willing to do that, but they did cause them to go to court, so it could be just a matter of reasonable retaliation, understandable retaliation, that they then would file against her, and they'd probably win. Which, worst case scenario, if it is fully against her, means that she might have to change her business name, which is her birth name. Maybe maybe Katy Hudson would be an option. She could go for that. I don't know if anyone's using that currently. Anyway, in related news, well-known Batman actor Michael Douglas has announced that he will be using his birth name for certain business endeavors going forward. And we have a couple of people to say goodbye to before we go today. First up is Andy Paley. They're both musical. Who is a musician known for the work he did with his band The Paley Brothers back in the day, as well as being a record producer. Worked with well-known musicians such as Brian Wilson, Chris Isaak. I'm not going to name everybody because, as always happens with these farewells, if I named all the amazing famous people whose careers they influenced over the years, we'd never be finished. But to many people, he wasn't known as being the artist who played with the Paley Brothers. He wasn't known as working with Brian Wilson and Chris Isaak. He was known for his work on television. He worked on The L Word. He worked on Ren and Stimpy, remember them? And for a lot of you, he worked on SpongeBob. Now, SpongeBob was quite a bit after my time. I know, I'm old. But he probably had a very key influence on a lot of your childhoods. Andy is survived by his wife Heather and their 2 children. He passed away in Burlington, Vermont of throat cancer. He was 72 years old. And next up is Vic Flick, who, as well as having a very satisfying name to say, he began his career back in the 1950s, working as part of the John Barry 7. Now, that connection with John Barry is important and will come up again throughout his career. He spent most of his life as a session musician. Session musicians are, quite frankly, probably some of the most important and most accomplished musicians in the industry. I think it's fair to say that the best guitarists, the best drummers, whatever, are people you've never heard of. But if you looked at the list of works they were on, you'd recognize a lot of them. But you do know him, even if you don't recognize the name. I'm not going to hum it, I'll just explain it to you verbally. It's for the work he did on helping to arrange and playing on the James Bond theme tune. That's him playing the guitar there. In a 2021 interview with Guitar Player, he said, "I placed the dearmament pickup near the bridge. I put a crushed cigarette packet underneath it to get it nearer the strings. That helped to get that round sound. Also important was the way the guitar was recorded. It was picked up by the mics for the orchestra, and it gave the guitar a mysterious, powerful sound. It was a sound we created, to a certain extent, and it had a bite that they loved." He also worked, over the course of his career, with members of the Beatles, Tom Jones, Herman's Hermits, and lots of others. But playing on and arranging that song, I feel, is the biggest, most influential part of his legacy. Vic is survived by his wife Judith, and one of their 2 children. The other of their children passed away in the early 2000s. Vic passed away from complications from Alzheimer's in Los Angeles. He was 87 years old. And that brings us to the end of This Week in Hell. Thank you very much for watching. I'm going to head downstairs. I'm going to warm myself up because it's very, very cold in Scotland right now. We're in the minuses. We had a weather warning telling people not to drive, apparently. So that's fun. I'm also going to browse things on Amazon. I have not been paid by Google yet, but we're at that time of the month where it should go into my bank account any moment. It's usually between the 21st and 26th. So when that happens, I will have a basket of things from the Black Friday sales that I've been needing, some things I've just been wanting, and I will purchase those as and when the money drops. It's more of just kind of grazing my bank account this month. So until next time, thank you very much for watching, and take very good care of yourselves. Bye-bye.